Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, thank you for attending, and we'll be starting the meeting in about 5 minutes. And if everyone doesn't mind muting themselves, that would be great. Hi, everybody who's just joining us. Thank you. We'll be starting the presentation in about 4 minutes.
Monthly payments, and he's only making payments since then.
Hi, all. If you're just joining us, thank you for joining us tonight. We will wait for a few more minutes for more attendees to join, and then we'll get going with the meeting.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Mike Keene. I am the Studies and Plans Engineer for IDOT District 2. On behalf of IDOT and our design group, I want to welcome you to our third public meeting for the US 20 reconstruction project from Shaw Road to Appleton Road in Belvedere. Today, we'll be showing you the refinements to the design since we last had our previous meeting. We appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule to join us. I'll turn the meeting over to our design group to begin.
Hello, I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's virtual public hearing for the US Business Route 20 improvements from Shaw Road to State Street North Appleton Road intersection in Belvedere. We have had two other public meetings for this project. The first one was held in January 12th of 2022, and the second virtual meeting was held this year on May 11th. The contents and recordings of both meetings are on our project website. My name is Ellie Koski, and I'll be facilitating today's meeting. Before we begin with the presentation, we would like to mention a few housekeeping items. We are using this virtual event to provide updates to the study, present the final proposed improvements, as well as to collect your feedback on the changes that have occurred since the last meeting. As we go through the presentation, I'm sure you will have some questions or comments. For those using the Zoom app, there is the chat feature that we will be monitoring. At the bottom of your Zoom window, you can click the button titled Chat. When you do so, a window will appear where you can type comments and/or questions. Please chat your questions or comments to our host, Jordan Rogowski. Her name is highlighted on the screen. Also, to help with bandwidth and prevent background noise, everyone has been muted, and we kindly ask that you turn off your videos during this presentation. You may post your questions to the chat at any time, but we will address questions in the questions and answers session toward the end of the hearing. A study team member will be recording comments and questions in the chat. The team will do its best to provide answers to all the questions tonight. However, if we run out of time, we will still document them for the study and provide responses. Questions can be asked after this hearing, and we will discuss the in-person opportunity to share your feedback at the end of the presentation. Just a note, this hearing is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the study website in case anyone has technical difficulties or needs to leave before the meeting is over. We will also post the presentation slides and the questions asked along with our responses to the website following this meeting. To start, I'd like to introduce our team of presenters for today's hearing. Representing the Northwest region of the Illinois Department of Transportation, or as we may refer throughout the hearing as IDOT, as Mike Keene. He is the Studies and Plans Engineer and has a design and construction background and continues to oversee the geometric development on this project and all projects within District 2. Representing the consultant team responsible for the design of this project is Amber Petkovic, and she is the consultant's project engineer on this project and is responsible for planning, directing, and coordinating the study and design of this project. Jeff Bushner is a consultant's environmental engineer. Our agenda today includes explaining the purpose of this hearing, recapping the study to date, discussing the history of the study, looking at the proposed improvements, reviewing the anticipated project impacts, talking about next steps, and then having a live question and answer session. Now, I'll hand it off to Amber to start the presentation.
Thanks, Ellie. So you may have noticed in the letters and the email correspondence that you've received that we're calling this a public hearing instead of a public meeting, like our previous presentations. I wanted to explain really quickly what we mean by these two different terms. So in general, public meetings and public hearings are similar in that they both feature project information on display in some sort of format, and they provide an opportunity for the public to comment on the project. However, for federally aided projects like this one, which is also requiring right-of-way from quite a few parcels, it's a federal requirement that a hearing be at least offered to the public. What a hearing allows is an official written transcript of the hearing and the comments received during the comment period. Although we've been recording the previous meetings and putting them on the project website for people to review at their convenience, the transcript is meant to be an impartial account of the events. Then it's submitted to the Federal Highway Administration as documentation of the sentiments of the public involvement process, and is also filed in the design report for the archives. So given that information, today's hearing is going to present the proposed improvements, similar to what we've done at the previous meetings, but this time we're going to focus on the impacts that this project is anticipated to have regarding land acquisition and the surrounding environment. And we will also be providing a new format for you to provide comments to get your voice heard, which I'll explain a little bit more in detail later on in the presentation. In case we have any new attendees, I wanted to provide a brief recap of the study history. But as a reminder, the two previous public meetings have been recorded and are on the project website for viewing. So this study is the preliminary engineering and environmental reevaluation of US Business Route 20 from Shaw Road through the State Street Appleton Road intersection in Belvedere. And what we're evaluating in the study is the reconstruction of approximately 4 miles of roadway, including widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes to accommodate future traffic and development, and the associated impacts this may have on the surrounding environment. This segment and the one just east of here that connects to US 20 to the south are the last 2 segments of US Business Route 20 between Rockford and Belvedere that have not been widened to at least 4 lanes. As a reminder, this study is overseen by IDOT, and IDOT organizes their projects into these 3 phases, which gives you an idea of the timeline of a project. Phase 1 is the planning stage that includes preliminary engineering and environmental studies. This is the phase we're currently in for this project. The ultimate product is a design report that establishes a recommended alternative and guides the development of phase 2. Phase 2 is the detailed design of the proposed improvements and involves assembling contract plans that a future contractor will use to build the project. And also land acquisition happens during this phase. And then phase 3 is the physical construction of the project. For this project, all 3 phases have been funded and has been allocated for funding. And so it's just a matter of kind of working through these phases. We've been asked when construction is going to occur, so this slide is just showing some approximate timeframes for each phase. As part of the study, this slide summarizes items that we've been investigating as we work our way through the planning process. One of the items that I wanted to note underneath the data collection was one that's called 1986 Findings. For those who may not know how this project came about, I wanted to give a little bit of a background. This current study segment was actually part of a larger study that was performed back in the 1980s. At that time, there was a study investigating the potential widening of a much larger segment of US Business Route 20 from the interstate to Highline Street in Belvedere. That 1986 study and the limits shown by the 3 segments on the screen made it all the way through the phase 1 process, which included several different public involvement meetings, a public hearing, environmental investigations, and analysis of 4 different alternatives, which had various median types and the roadway alignment locations. The final result was a Federal Highway Administration approved design report that recommended a 4-lane section with widening shifted generally more to the north of the existing roadway, a flush median, full shoulders, and no access control. However, due to such items as available funding, widening of the entire corridor was not progressed. The segment between the interstate and Shaw Road was prioritized, given its significance near the interchange and what used to be the popular Clock Tower Resort. And as you know, that section, highlighted in green on the screen, has since been widened to a 4-lane section. The remaining 2 segments in red and pink were tabled until additional funding was available. Since our current study is building off the foundation of this 1986 study, Jeff is going to briefly summarize the primary finding and impacts that were known for the area back then.
Okay, thanks, Amber. Good evening, everyone. As Amber discussed, the project was processed in the 1980s as an environmental assessment, or EA for short. Now, an EA is one of the three main types of environmental review documents under the National Environmental Policy Act. And that's a federal law basically that says federal agencies must look at their actions' impacts on the environment. The EA is a mid-level type review document, and it's conducted when it is unknown whether a project will have significant impacts. If there are no significant impacts, then the federal agency issues what they call a finding of no significant impact, or a FONSI for short, and the project can proceed. If it does identify significant impacts, then an environmental impact statement must be prepared, and that's a higher level review document. For this project, FHWA issued a FONSI in 1986, which you can see the signature page here on this slide. Keep in mind that the original EA covered all three road segments. Because the west segment has already been constructed, this reevaluation document that we've been conducting only covers the two remaining segments. And the content of the original EA back in the 80s, it basically covers the same outline of today's EAs. You have different sections starting with a purpose and need statement, the affected environment, what alternatives were considered and what the preferred alternative is. And then finally, what are the consequences to the environment? And then also what public comments and agency coordination was conducted. So on these next couple slides, I'd like to summarize the environmental resources and impacts that were documented in that original EA back from 1986. They basically found that one residence would have to be displaced, meaning relocated, but that was on the western section that has already been constructed. To break out the right-of-way needs, there was 37 acres of permanent right-of-way identified. And if you break that out into different types of land use, about 30 acres was farmland, 2.5 acres was residential, and about 4.5 acres were commercial. The original EA did identify several potential historic structures, but identified no impacts to them. And IDOT also at the time had made a commitment to investigate potential archaeological sites during the design phase. I mentioned here section 4F. I'll get into exactly what that is in a few slides upcoming, but basically it has to do with impacts to public parks and recreation areas. At the time, the Boone County Conservation District had property along the corridor, but the design back then did not impact it. Wetlands were reviewed, but none were present based on National Wetland Inventory mapping. As far as streams, the EA identified Beaver Creek and the need to replace the bridge over that creek, and also associated with the creek is a floodplain that would have to be crossed. As far as biological resources, the EA identified tree removal areas and identified the bald eagle and Indiana bat as species present in the general vicinity, but mentioned no impacts to them. There was a noise study conducted. The overall consensus on it was that due to lower traffic speeds by the proposed project, that overall noise would be reduced. However, the analysis did identify 3 noise impacts, and noise barriers, meaning noise walls, were considered, but it was found not cost effective. As far as special waste, which also includes hazardous waste and contaminated soils, there was a general discussion in the EA, but no specific surveys conducted. Nowadays, we actually conduct site-specific surveys. And as far as the public involvement, what happened back then is IDOT started out with a couple initial meetings, public awareness meeting and a data collection meeting, followed by 2 public informational meetings, finally held a public hearing like we're having today, and then the public overwhelmingly were in favor of alternative 4. Now Amber is going to discuss a little more of the study history.
So this is a summary of the 1986 report, but something that the 86 report did not address was future access points in conjunction with the current intersecting roadway system. Therefore, in 1996, IDOT collaborated with the Rockford Metropolitan Planning Area to study the desired intent of the corridor and the number of intersections that would be allowed in order to preserve the integrity of traffic flow through the corridor. Having an access control plan in place in advance of the future development is crucial to eliminating random access points by future developers' personal objectives, which can ultimately impact everyone's safety and traffic flows. So this slide summarizes the timeline of critical public involvement that's occurred throughout the two studies. Our current study has been reevaluating the changes throughout the years since the 1986 study and updating improvements accordingly. And we have definitely seen a wide range of changes throughout the years, from the clock tower resort and the Chrysler plant closing. We had the pandemic, which caused traffic shifts, and now a bit of a revival with new casinos and more industrial commercial sites being constructed near I-90. And we've even heard several parcel owners along this corridor mentioning the desire for more commercial development on their properties and the potential need for future access points. All of this input helped shape the proposed improvements for this area. So what are these proposed improvements that we keep referring to? Well, this image shows a rendering of the typical existing conditions on the west end of the project in the more rural section from the west project limit to about Town Hall Road. It's generally a 2-lane roadway with 1 lane in each direction, widening to include turn lanes at the intersections, but otherwise separated by a double yellow line and minimal shoulders. In order to meet the study goals of improving the pavement condition and roadway capacity, the bottom image shows a conceptual rendering of what the 4-lane roadway would look like. There would be 2 lanes in each direction, which would provide consistency with the adjacent US Business Route 20 segments on either side. And between the eastbound and westbound lanes, there would be a median of some sort. And really, depending on where you are on the corridors, what type of median that would be. So it would either be a raised paved median, which has curb and gutter at the inside edges of pavement and provides separation between the opposing lanes. And then near intersections, this raised median would narrow in order to allow a turn lane. It may also be a mountable corrugated median, which are only proposed in a few areas. For example, where we make that transition from the flush median on the west end to our raised median on either end of the study area. The corrugation provides a warning to encroaching vehicles. We received several comments on the incorporation of the raised median, and there were concerns that access would be limited and drivers would be forced to go to the nearest intersection to make U-turns to access driveways or the opposite direction of travel. So in order to address these concerns, we added gaps in the median that provided access points to the opposite side of the roadway while still maintaining the traffic flow separation. These gaps were spaced according to allowable criteria and located to limit the number of openings by grouping driveways to more of a common area. Even with these gaps, the studies show that raised medians still reduce crashes, decrease delays, increase capacity, and reduce vehicle speeds. We also received concerns that certain vehicles would not be able to make the turns into their driveways given the gap size. So this illustration shows, here's how we essentially determine the size of the gap given a vehicle. And in this case, we used about a 60-foot long truck, turning into a driveway on the north side and a field entrance on the south side. Now we realize there are different needs for different parcels, so we'd be glad to look into any driveway if someone has a particular need to be accommodated. Just contact the study team and we can coordinate this. Currently on the east end of the project, the more urban section, it's already 5 lanes with a flush bidirectional turn lane. The proposed condition would be very similar to what's out there now, but with new, slightly wider pavement to accommodate the addition of the bike lane in each direction to meet complete streets requirements. Another item that was added to the project at the second public meeting was the incorporation of 8 new dry bottom detention basins, shown in red on the screen. These basins were incorporated after analyzing the study area's hydraulics and hearing the comments received from residents of previous flooding. The goal of these basins is for water quantity control to reduce peak flows and limit downstream flooding. Similarly, in the Anderson Drive area, given the lack of available surface space for a basin, we're proposing large storm sewer pipes to act as underground storage for this particular area. And then there have been 3 intersections within the study area that we've received comments on. There were requests for a signal at Anderson Drive and Town Hall Road by residents, And there is a need for further investigation on how to reduce the delays at Dock Wolf for the Highline Street intersection. Since the last meeting, and based on these comments, we've actually acquired 2023 traffic counts and the latest available accident reports. Upon review of these items and the criteria that is required for a signal, the only new item being incorporated since the last meeting is the addition of a signal at the Town Hall Road intersection. The other two locations still do not justify a need for a signal in the proposed conditions at this time. And keep in mind, when we're looking at these traffic analysis, we're actually using 2045 traffic. So during the layout of the roadway, we tried to balance the limits of improvements between the parcels on either side in order to minimize the impacts to each parcel. But land acquisition is still necessary. So I wanted to familiarize yourself with some terms for what you're going to be seeing on some exhibits shortly. The existing roadway right-of-way is the line representing the boundary area that is currently owned by IDOT, in this case along US Business Route 20. So the top upper reddish brown line shows what this boundary line is going to look like on our aerial exhibit that you'll see shortly. Now, for the proposed land acquisition on this project, we anticipate two different types. We've got the proposed right-of-way type, or what we call fee simple. And this is proposed right-of-ways when IDOT acquires land beyond the existing right-of-way up to this grayish line that you see on the screen. In this case, all rights and interests of that portion of land would be acquired by IDOT for its use now and in the future. And then the second type is a temporary easement, as shown by this tannish line. So for this, the ownership is actually retained by the current owner, but IDOT and contractors would be allowed temporary access to this property, typically for construction purposes and being able to move people and machinery around for such tasks as grading or driveway reconstruction to tie the new roadway into the existing conditions. We are not proposing any entire parcel acquisitions. Instead, the acquisitions are more strips of land near the roadway in order to accommodate the roadway widening and provide a roadside ditch. And then also for space for IDOT to maintain the new grass slope or detention basins in the future. So now let's walk through a very kind of aerial of what the project improvements are gonna like. So I'm gonna switch over my screen really quick. All right, so to start, we'll look at our western limits of the project. The logical termini of the study area is the point where the existing road of US Business Route 20 starts to taper down from the 4-lane section out there now down to the 2-lane section. This is approximately 1,000 feet east of the Shaw Road intersection. So before we scroll too much more into there, I wanted to go over a little about what these different colored lines are that you're seeing on the screen and what they mean. So the yellow lines are approximately the property lines. And we already went over that reddish brown line being the existing roadway right-of-way. The pink is the outside edge of shoulder, and the blue is the edge of pavement. So the raised median locations is outlined in the orange lines. And then the mountable corrugated median is that light green with the hatching, which you'll see at the transition points from the flush median to the raised median. And then also that whitish gray line is the proposed right-of-way. You can even see a better exhibit of the temporary easement will be further on down the strip, but you can kind of see at the driveway we're asking for a temporary easement in order to build that field entrance. As we move to the east, you'll see peach lines, which are representative of those field entrances and driveways. These are generally in the same location as they are now. And then we put those gaps in the median for access to these driveways or field entrances. And like I mentioned before, we tried to place these gaps where we tried to align the entrances on either side of the roadway to utilize the same gap in order to minimize the number of those gaps, but still maintain partial access control and it's according to allowable spacing criteria. There will be some areas where we'll need to modify the field entrances tie-in to the new roadway, like you're seeing on the south side. In order to have that turn lane in the median, in order for people to access their driveways, we shifted that one driveway a little bit to the west relative to where the existing is in order to have that turn lane fit. And then also what you're seeing right now is in the fluorescent green are the drainage items. And on the south side of the roadway, we're asking for proposed right-of-way, which is needed for that culvert extension due to the widening of the roadway. And we're going to add some rock at the end of that culvert in order to help slow the water flow. So as we scroll to the east, here's an example of the temporary easement I was talking about in that beigeish line. This is the Beaver Bluffs Conservation Area and Dog Park on the south side of the road, which is public parkland owned by the Boone County Conservation District. In our second public meeting, we discussed in very detail the improvements that are proposed along that parkland, so I won't go too much more into that. But in general, it does include the roadway widening, and we're regrading the roadside of the outside of the pavement to tie back down into the existing ground. So, and again, we're coordinating these improvements with the Boone County Conservation District. At the Olson Road intersection, the configuration is generally staying the same, except that there will be that additional lane in each direction on US Business Route 20, and then we're also putting a signal at Olson. And you'll see on the southeast part of the screen, there are 4 driveways that are really in close proximity to this intersection. But yet they're far enough apart that it doesn't really make sense to kind of combine them into the same gap in the median. So for this area, we are proposing a corrugated mountable median that will provide that refuge for vehicles coming out of those driveways and turning left, but we'll still have allowed them to access their driveway. So we continue to kind of pan to the east. So there's going to be a bridge over the Beaver Creek, which is the same as what's out there now. But all we're doing is accommodating the 2 lanes in each direction, the median, and then full shoulders over that bridge. On the south side, you're going to see the Glen H. Green open space. And this is owned by the Belvedere Park District, which is another parkland for public use. And again, in our second public meeting, we kind of went over the details and what sections look like for the improvements at this area as well. But again, it's essentially doing the pavement and having the roadside ditch and tapering back down into existing conditions. We do not anticipate impacting the existing retaining wall and that silo that is located on the Glen H. Green open space area. Distillery Road's intersection will remain signalized, and the intersection will essentially just count for the US Business Route 20, the 2 lanes in each direction. And the only improvements that we're proposing on Distillery Road are very minor in order to just tie back in the proposed road into the existing. And we're really just going to pan kind of slowly through these improvements. There's a lot of farmland out here, and between Distillery and Beaver Valley Road, we have several more of these median gaps for the driveways and the field entrances to provide access. You also see a detention basin on your screen. And the large fluorescent green are the culverts that we're planning on improving as well. As we approach Beaver Valley Road intersection, this will remain stop controlled. You can see another large culvert where we would need right away to accommodate that extension of that culvert and the rock treatment at the end in order to help with the water flows. And here we're coming upon several of the businesses in the area whose entrances, they will be impacted by the widening. So we're working with those those owners in order to coordinate the tie back into the existing conditions into our proposed roadway. Approaching the Anderson intersection, we have received several comments from homeowners stating that traffic has increased in this area, and they would like us to reevaluate whether a signal at this intersection is justified. And I kind of went over that We did get new traffic data. We have looked at the crash analysis from recent years, and it's still not justifying a signal. So at this time, we will be continuing with the stop controlled. However, we are, as I mentioned, still in phase 1, and we will continue to monitor this intersection and the reports and the data that we're given and to see if anything has changed before construction happens. Between Anderson Drive and Town Hall Road, there's been several reports of flooding in the past. We've added that underground storage and the detention basins in the area that I mentioned earlier to hopefully help alleviate some of these drainage issues and also accommodate the addition of the lanes, the additional drainage that evolves from the extra lanes. And then we're also planning to increase the size of these culverts in order to help better handle these existing flows. So Town Hall Road will be realigned as it approaches the intersection with US Business Route 20. This is in preparation for the anticipated extension of Town Hall Road to the south, which is to be done by Boone County. We plan to use the footprint of the existing Town Hall Road that will be removed to place a new detention basin for drainage needs, and then we'll extend those driveways to meet the new realigned roadway. The intersection will be having the traffic signal added that I discussed earlier. And this intersection is also where the roadway will be converting the raised median to a flush median as we begin that transition from the rural section into the urban section with the driveways. And similarly, because of that transition, we'll also be lowering the posted speed from 45 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour as we go through this section. As we scroll more to the east, you'll see similar items that we've mentioned before, such as extending the box culverts, adding some additional detention basins. This is where the two-way left turn flush median is, similar to what is in the more urban section. We also have existing water main and fiber optic lines and utilities that are in close proximity to the roadway here, and that all those utilities will be coordinated in phase 2 in order to determine what the best course of action for those items are. Approaching the Van Epps intersection, this will remain signal controlled. We're also transitioning from the shoulder on the west leg of the intersection to the curb and gutter with the bike lane on the east side of the roadway of the intersection. New sidewalk will also be placed in order to have a continuous pedestrian accommodations from here to the Appleton State Street intersection. We'll also continue with the two-way left turn lane through here. And as you can see on both sides of the roadway, there's a strip of a temporary easement that's required all along that portion of roadway from Van Epps to Appleton. And this is essentially due to temporarily needing space to construct that sidewalk, which is really close to the existing right-of-way line, and also to construct the driveways that will be tying back in from the existing parking lots into the new roadway. And then Highline Street and Doc Wolf intersection will remain stop controlled, and the minor improvements along those roadways are to essentially just tie back into the new roadway. And then finally, the last segment between Highline and Appleton, this is also exhibiting the two-way left turn lane and those temporary easements we talked about. And the actual intersection itself will remain signal controlled and will look very similar to what's out there now, except we will be updating the pavement, the lighting, the signals, and the sidewalk leading into that intersection. So I know this was a lot of information that we kind of scrolled through really quick, but we have placed PDFs of this exhibit on the project website for your viewing. You can kind of go through looking for your property. And then if you have any comments based on that, feel free to send it to the project team. And so now I think Jeff is going to discuss the project's anticipated impacts on the surrounding environment, given these currently proposed improvements and the current design criteria that's evolved since the 1986 report.
Okay. Amber, I think the think the slides are still, or do you have them up yet?
Not yet. It is.
I could get started while you're throwing them up there. This project is needing a reevaluation, and we say reevaluation because the original EA and FONSI were processed, like we said, in the 80s. That's been a stretch of time. So we've had to conduct several new environmental surveys and studies and coordinate with the public and with stakeholders and with resource agencies in order to determine what has changed and whether any significant impacts have arisen since that original EA. Keep in mind that we had to reassess all those parts, all those elements of the EA document. You know, like I said earlier, the purpose and need for the proposed action, the alternative section, the environmental impact section of the proposed action and other alternatives, and also document all of our public involvement and public engagement activities. I'll stop right there, Amber, because the list of resources I'd like everybody to see. So if you could advance it to the environmental assessment reevaluation, there we there. The EA reevaluation document has been prepared. It is still in a draft stage currently. There's a few final pending items that we need to document, which I'll go over a little later. But for the reevaluation, we reviewed how the project's current design would affect or impact environmental resources, which you see listed here. This isn't all comprehensive, but these are a lot of the primary resources that we look at. They're broken up into two major categories. On the left, it's the environmental resources, which are more of your natural or biological type resources. And on the right, more of the human environment, the social, the economic resources, and how it impacts the human environment. So on the next slide, I'll go over how we inventoried all these resources. We developed this inventory of known environmental resources along the project and updated this as new information was gathered. IDOT conducts specific environmental surveys, which include cultural resource surveys, biological resources, wetland surveys, and special waste investigations. We also conducted a new noise analysis that was completed according to the latest IDOT and FHW procedures. Some of the resources identified on this map include streams, which are identified in the kind of light blue lines, floodplain and floodways, which are the blue hatched areas around the creeks, parks and recreation areas. We identified sensitive noise receptors, which I'll discuss in a bit, identified by some of the red dots. Prime and important farmland, you can see on the aerial map. Any public facility, service facilities, businesses, and wetland areas. So again, just like we did for the original EA, I'd like to, on the next couple of slides, summarize what impacts we've identified for this reevaluation of the EA. Again, for these remaining two segments, not the one that was already constructed, but no displacements or relocations of businesses or residences. The right-of-way breakdown is 23.23 acres of permanent right-of-way needed and 2.60 acres of temporary easements. The design now includes bike accommodations along widened shoulders. And like Amber discussed, Town Hall Road will be realigned at the intersection with US Business Route 20. The design also now includes 8 detention basins that were not in the original EA. Amber identified that one business where parking space would have to be reconfigured. Also, we identified about 15.3 acres of farmland conversion. And most of this has to do with some of those detention areas that are in farmland areas. Currently, as far as cultural resources, 16 structures are being evaluated for historic eligibility. That is still in review, so we'll document that in the final reevaluation. We do have those 2 park areas that Amber identified, Beaver Bluffs Conservation Area and the Glen H Open Space Area. I'll discuss that in a little more detail in a bit. We identified 0.28 acres of wetland impacts so far. And again, we are still have pending survey results for wetland surveys done in those detention areas. We do have in-stream work at Beaver Creek, just like the original EA, but also we identified 2 tributaries of Beaver Creek and 2 tributaries of the Kishwaukee River where we'll have in-stream work. Kind of associated with some of those creeks, we'll have a crossing just like in the original EA, floodplain crossings at 3 of these creeks, Beaver Creek and 2 tributaries to Kishwaukee. We've identified approximately around 600 trees to be removed. And then also on threatened and endangered species, we have a few survey results still pending, but we'll likely see a seasonal tree removal restriction for protecting bat species that may be roosting during the warm season. And also we're undergoing a review of rusty patch bumblebee since it has been known to occur in this county. We completed a traffic noise analysis, which I'll get into more specifics in a bit. And then also there have been special waste surveys and recognized environmental conditions were identified. That basically means that there's maybe some previous land use that is might have had some soil contamination, et cetera, but we'll do additional studies during the design phase to pinpoint those down. And at least 3 environmental permits will be needed. We've identified a Section 404 permit and Section 401 water quality certification for impacts to those streams and to wetlands. Also a construction of the floodway permit for crossing those floodway areas we'll have to get that from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And then finally, an NPDES permit for stormwater discharges from construction because we have greater than 1 acre of disturbance. Now, to kind of get into a little more specifics on a couple of these studies, as far as the traffic noise analysis, we did complete it for the current project design, and it was conducted in accordance with IDOT's latest highway traffic noise assessment manual. We first identified 25 sensitive noise receptors in the vicinity of the project. And a sensitive noise receptor is basically just an exterior area where frequent human activity occurs. We evaluated these 25 receptors for 3 conditions, and this might sound a little bit complicated. It kind of does get into some specifics, so I've tried to summarize as plainly as I can. But we evaluated them for the existing noise condition, basically what is the noise level now in 2025. That was our year we started for existing, and then 20 years down the road, what would be the noise levels without building any new roadway, and what would be the noise conditions with the preferred alternative in 2045. So we modeled these conditions using FHWA's traffic noise model, and the results of that model showed noise levels ranging from either a decrease of 1 decibel to an increase of 3 decibels from the existing condition to the build condition. And to kind of put this plainly, this really is not that much of a predicted increase. It typically, a person has to have at least about a 3 decibel increase for the changes to be perceptible to humans. But according to the FHWA thresholds, we did identify 6 receptors that approached, met, or exceeded FHWA's noise abatement criteria, which is basically just a decibel level of where FHWA thinks it's an impact. So for those 6 receptors, we did consider noise abatement. And basically that would be in the form of a noise wall, a noise barrier. 4 of those receptors were found not to be feasible to construct because the noise barrier would not achieve at least 5 decibel reduction for at least 2 impacted receivers. And of the remaining 2 impacted receivers, 1 was not reasonable to construct because it would not achieve IDOT's noise reduction design goal of at least 8 decibel traffic noise reduction at 1 or more benefited receptors. And the final noise barrier that was considered was not reasonable to build because it was determined to not be cost effective. Therefore, based on the traffic noise evaluation that was conducted, noise abatement measures are likely not to be implemented based on preliminary design. And now getting back to the parks, Section 4F basically means it's a part of the Department of Transportation Act of 1966. And this law basically affords protections to publicly owned parks, recreation areas, wildlife refuges, and historic sites. Keep in mind, this law only pertains to DOT, Department of Transportation Agency actions. Now, we need to follow Section 4F policies because the project requires use of land from the two adjacent parks that we identified, the Beaver Bluffs Conservation Area and the Glen H. Green Open Space Area. But part of Section 4F law has allowances for uses of parkland if they're de minimis impacts as well. And those uses usually are considered minor. So for minor uses where the officials that are responsible for the resource, when they agree that it will not adversely affect the activities, features, and attributes that qualify that resource for 4F protection, then the federal agency can make a de minimis impact determination. Now on the next slide, I believe we have kind of a close-up of the aerial that Amber had identified earlier. This is the Beaver Bluffs Conservation Area. And you can see that temporary construction easement swath along the south side of the road from the existing right-of-way. We've quantified that the project would require about 0.44 acre of temporary easement from the Beaver Bluffs Conservation Area for construction of the widened roadway. So as part of the intent to make a de minimis 4F finding, there is a public notice requirement. So that was conducted through the second public meeting that we held earlier in the year. And the department requested the public's views on the proposed use of this parkland. And on the next slide, which shows the Glen H. Green open space area, you can see the proposed right-of-way and the small temporary construction easement that's needed for the driveway construction. We've identified about 0.54 acre of a permanent right-of-way and 0.05 acre of temporary easement needed from the Glen H. Green open space. And again, this impact was included on the notice to the public on the second public meeting. So just to recap on public involvement for this reevaluation phase, we did have a virtual public meeting in January of 22, and then a smaller stakeholder meeting in February of 2023, which mainly dealt with issues and concerns on drainage. And then finally this year, we had the second virtual public meeting on May in 2023. And today we have the public hearing. And I want to point out that IDOT did have numerous contacts with residents, business owners, and other stakeholders during the last couple of years. And finally, what are the next steps of this EA reevaluation? Well, we'll receive all the comments that any of you have and get those addressed and document that in the reevaluation document. We're also wanting to wrap up the environmental survey results for a couple of these, the biological resources and the cultural resources. We need to do a final resolution and documentation of the de minimis Section 4F findings. And finally, get the reevaluation document for review and approval by IDOT and FHWA.
All right, so thanks, Jeff. As we move on to talking a little bit about construction, now, as I mentioned before, we still have phase 1 and phase 2 to complete before we even start thinking about construction, but we've already received some questions about how this may be impacting to the people along the corridor. So since this mostly does get designed in phase 2, the details will come out a little bit later. However, we have started to investigate what may be feasible options for the construction. So just kind of to show you, our goal will be to minimize the impacts and maintain the access to all these driveways and the businesses at all times. This is typically done by building the project in pieces like you're seeing on the screen. And what this means is we would have you would be building the one side of the roadway and shifting all the vehicles to the opposite side of the roadway. And there may be some need for some temporary widening of the roadways to accommodate and make sure there's enough room for those travel lanes being shifted to the one side. And then you would kind of do the reverse in the next stage and build the other side of the road while the vehicles travel on what was just built in the previous stage. But obviously there's going to be intersections and areas with a significant raise or lowering of the roadway profile relative to what's out there now. This will be kind of challenging to construct. So the goal is to keep the safety of not only the drivers, but also the workers in mind during construction. So therefore, if constructing these areas in stages like this becomes a safety concern, there may be a need to investigate partial closures, but we would not close the entire roadway corridor. We would look to keep closures to small sections of the roadway at a time in off-peak hours, and to ensure that there are other means of accessibilities available. As the detailed design progresses, the public will be updated on what that interim lane configurations will look like in advance of any changes occurring so that you can plan accordingly. But like we said, however, construction is not anticipated to at least 2026. So there's a few more years before this gets in place. So what are the next steps to this overall study? Similar to the past meetings, we've had a comment period for the public to provide questions or comments based on what you've seen here today. The three methods of making comments that we've used in the past is through the project website, which you can see the web address on the screen, or you can also scan that code in the upper left corner, which will take you to the project website. You can also send an email to IDOT Study and Plans Engineer at the email provided on the screen. Please note that the name has changed since the previous two meetings. So if you are going to send an email, please notice the correct email address. And then also you can definitely mail any questions or comments to IDOT's District 2 office, which has the address shown on the screen. However, we're offering a new method of providing comments. On October 30th from 1 to 4, we'll be also providing the opportunity to have your comments submitted verbally to an in-person IDOT staff member and a court reporter. This will ensure that all comments are captured in an accurate transcript. There will not be another presentation during this time. This is meant just for recording the comments, but there will be project documentation such as the original environmental assessment report, the corridor access plan, and that a draft of this reevaluation of the environmental assessment that we've kind of been talking about today. And then we'll also have a roll plot of the improvements on an aerial so you can kind of see the parcels that you're interested in if you want to kind of take a look at that in person. And then the final product of our phase 1 study will be a design report that summarizes our analysis process, all this public involvement coordination and the comments we received, the environmental findings that Jeff was talking about, and then these final improvements that we've gone over. And then upon the review of this report and the confirmation of meeting the NEPA process, we would ideally be granted design approval, at which point we can conclude the phase 1 stage and then move on to that phase 2 stage. And then further down the line in phase 2, we'll begin that land acquisition process we were talking about. And we introduced this process in the second public meeting, so I'll briefly kind of summarize what those steps are. Given the additional land we are anticipating needing to construct the project, we're working on determining the parcel ownership and the location of the property lines by title commitments. And then in order to purchase property, a plat of survey has to be prepared, which is a legal drawing that has been surveyed and certified by a licensed land surveyor that depicts a property relative to the existing roadway right-of-way. And then, of course, private property can't be taken for public use without compensation. Therefore, the third step is IDOT will obtain an appraiser to determine the fair market value of a property to offer compensation. This takes into account such items as comparable sales, number of acres of agricultural land that would be converted to highway use, and then such items that Jeff mentioned, like contaminated property, and then the remediation that would be required for that contamination. And then once the appraisal is received, IDOT will coordinate with each impacted property owner and provide an offer of compensation. And as you can imagine, a project of this length can take approximately 2 years to complete all of these steps. So that brings us to the end of our project discussion and to our live Q&A portion of the hearing. As we mentioned earlier, go ahead and type any questions and comments that you may have in the chat box, and make sure to address those to Jordan Rogalasi so she can make sure that she gets those recorded. And so I will hand it over to Ellie so she can start reading those. And we also do have representatives online, not just for the presenters, but people from hydraulics and environment and land acquisition, if there's any comments on those items.
Thanks, Amber. So we do have a few questions that have already been asked. So I will start with those and we'll go from there. And as mentioned before, if we don't get a chance to personally answer your question, ensure that we will answer that on the website. And also we will have that in-person meeting, which we'll discuss at the very end of the presentation. So our first question is, I am interested to understand the procurement schedule and when the job will be out for bid. So Amber, would you mind taking that?
Sure. Yeah, so that was kind of the timeline that we were given on one of the earlier parts of the slides. As we mentioned, that we were hoping to conclude phase 1 in the early part of 2024. And then the next would be phase 2, which we said the governing task item would be land acquisition, which could take up to 2 years. So that puts us into 2026 for when this project would get let, and then construction itself, depending on what time of year that is let, could go into the next year. So we're anticipating 2026 to 2027 for construction.
Thanks, Amber. This is a comment. Go ahead.
I was just going to note, this is Mike Keene. One thing to note as well, just because we do have so many parcels that we have, not just on this project, but on other projects, this could very well push into a construction year of 2027. So it could easily be 27 and 28, just as easily as 26, 27. I guess, John Estrom, anything you'd like to add on that?
No, I think that's correct. I mean, we have a lot of projects and a lot of right of way to buy for those projects, so it's going to be a challenge for all of us. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks all. This is just a comment and I'll read that out loud. I strongly recommend this project because upon completion, the traffic flow will be greatly improved. The current bottleneck on 20 is where it merges down to one lane and many accidents occur there when someone tries to pass back into the right lane. Thanks for your comment. Okay, and another one is, what is the timeline for beginning construction on Route 20 and the estimated completion date? And I think we pretty much hit on that. So if there's any other comments you'd like to make, feel free to do so. Okay, the next one is, will there be a stoplight at Anderson Drive?
And I'll answer that. So I think I kind of alluded to this a few times. Unfortunately, not at this time, or not part of this project at this time. Is we're going to keep it at stop controlled. However, as we mentioned, we will continue to monitor this. If the data that we receive, either through crash reports or through an increase in traffic, it finally deems it to need a stoplight, we will put that in if it's happening before construction.
Great, thank you. The next question is, will construction completely close down State Street at any time?
Obviously, there's no guarantees, but we're shooting to not close it down completely. That is not our goal. We know there's a lot of businesses. We know there's a lot of residents. There are people that need to get in and out of here. So we would not close the entire corridor. If we closed anything, again, it would be based on safety, and it would be smaller sections. We'd make sure that people would be able to easily work their way around the area with very little adverse travel. And so our goal is to not close down the entire corridor.
Great, thanks, Amber. Our next question is, our next person who submitted something is just a comment. So again, I'll read it for the record. 4 lanes to Appleton would be great. Driving a bus from Rockford to Belvedere is a challenge when the road narrows down. People keep coming and I don't give when it goes to 2 lanes. Too many near misses. Most people don't like being behind buses or trucks. Thanks for your comment. Okay, here is one more comment. I have acquired 3 properties on the corridor and I'm concerned of how it will affect me.
I just wanted to make a quick statement there. And I'm sure there's plenty of people on the call that may have the same sentiments of how they individually may be impacted. So I just want to reiterate that there will be that opportunity on October 30th to meet with a few personnel that will be in person. If you want to take a look at the maps and point at your property and ask questions. But we also have been offering, if you would like to have a one-on-one, just contact the study team and we can coordinate a time to meet. So there are those 2 opportunities out there.
Thanks for that information, Amber. Another question was, why did you change from the far safer 2022 design to the goofy 2023 design? Your bike path excuse is just that, a nonsense excuse. Mike, I think you could handle that one.
Yes, most definitely. All right, so just so people are aware, our initial 2022 design showed that through the entire section from Shaw all the way to Belvedere, we did have a multi-use path on the south side of the roadway. In addition, we also had a raised median with no median breaks except for at intersections all the way from Shaw to Town Hall Road. From Town Hall Road to Appleton Road, we had the bidirectional flush median out there. So with that as the basis on this, frankly, from IDOT standpoint, the initial 2022 design is a preferred alternative with IDOT. It works very well at maintaining capacity. The less access points we put out there, the less chance for crashes there are out there. With that being said, the 2022 design also had a lot of concerns from local residents. The residents out there were concerned that they would have to do U-turns to utilize their accesses. They would have to possibly go a quarter mile to get to where they need to be and everything like that. So we did look at this again with respect to the raised median. There were some people, including the gentleman that wrote this question, that had requested a flush median. The reason we like the raised median is it provides safety out there that, like Amber had noted, by having that out there, it does give us some access control out there. However, we looked at this and said, okay, the local residents have a very good point. You know, it is difficult to transverse out here. You know, we don't know when commercial development's going to be arriving out here. So we want to give these accesses to the residents and to the field entrances and the farmers at this time. So again, what we did was we added these abbreviated turn lanes and openings for the residents. This is a compromise compared to what we had initially, but it will work much in the way that a flush median would, in that it allows people that are wanting to turn into their access to have their own little turn off space to turn and get off the mainline road and be able to get into their entrance. I guess, Amber, would you be able to pull up that display again showing the right in, right out, or the access breaks? My apologies. Okay, so you can see here, you know, originally we were talking raised median through here, it would be the full width the whole way. With these access breaks, we are allowing people to be able to turn into field entrances, into residences, and we are able to accommodate a variety of different vehicles. Now, we still have the raised median in there wherever there isn't an access, so that does increase the safety by keeping that separation from people and the vertical, barrier on this. Is it perfect? No, but it is definitely better than going to a flush median, because we are still providing a positive deterrence from people crossing in areas we don't want them to cross. And at the same time, we are giving the people that are going to be turning an opportunity to have their own little turn-off space off the main line. So that is why we did what we did with the median. Now, with respect to the multi-use path and why we had to eliminate that, part of IDOT's policy with complete streets is that when we build a multi-use path or whatever facility for bicycle and pedestrians, we must have someone to maintain that once it's done. We don't take care of paths. We don't snowplow paths any more than we do sidewalks or anything of that sort. We snowplow the roadway. We snowplow shoulders. Now, we approached numerous entities in the region. We asked numerous times to get some sort of agreement on this, and we were not successful in getting any sort of agreement on that. We spent a long time trying to get that. We talked to everyone that we could think of and asked them if there was anyone else as well. It just was not successful. So our next best option is to build the shoulders and build on-street bicycle accommodations, so we can still, with our snowplows, be able to plow the shoulders, be able to plow the bike lanes that we do have with this revised design. Is it the best option that is out there? No, but it is the best option we are able to do with the situation we're under.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Another question we have is, I'm sorry, let's see. I'm concerned about the several intersections that are currently 3 ways. Would expanding to 4 lanes of traffic create dangerous opportunities for collisions to occur?
I can take that as well. That's a very good question. Will the increase in lanes cause an increase in crashes? Now, conversely, right now we have out there the same amount of traffic, and we only have 2 lanes out there. We are very limited on turn lanes out there. We have limited other traffic control devices out there. So from a safety standpoint, the proposed design will be an improvement from existing conditions. We are adding lanes to better accommodate the existing traffic that's already there, and also future growth. We have measures such as 45-mile-an-hour speed limits through the rural area, adding the turn lanes at the intersections, adding those individual turn lanes in the median for these individual residences and field entrances. And then we will have, on the shoulder section, we'll have shoulder rumbles out there. On the bike lanes in town, there'll also be rumbles in between the bike lane and the driving lane. And then we are adding signals at several locations. Now, again, Amber noted there are several intersections that that people are requesting we add signals to. Again, right now, our warrants do not show that we can provide them. However, we're keeping a very close eye on those locations. So if warrants are met, we will add them. They have to meet the warrants before we can reasonably add those. Will they meet the warrants before construction? I can't say for certain, but we are keeping a close eye on that.
Great, thanks, Mike. Another person asked, since a separated multi-use path would service a greater portion of the population and provide greater safety, what are the perceived issues that would prevent the construction of said path, and what can be done to overcome these challenges?
Well, and I think Mike kind of answered a little bit of this question of, in order to build that separated path, we would need some assistance on the maintenance of it once it's constructed. Another issue I know that people have questioned about is the actual speed along this roadway and why we're going down to a 45 mile per hour. That 45 mile per hour would definitely be better for if we don't have the multi-use path for the bicycles that are on the shoulder. So I guess that's kind of the biggest thing is trying to get assistance on maintaining that bike path if it's going to be separated from the roadway.
Thanks, Amber. This person is concerned about the proposed passenger rail from Rockford to Chicago and the possibility that is converted to hazardous cargo rail.
I can discuss that briefly. There is a project that is out there that the district isn't involved with the proposal to have passenger rail from Rockford to Chicago. Again, we can't speak with authority on this because we're not involved with that particular project. I did speak to the individual that posed this question and provide some additional people that she could speak to on this. If there are other individuals that are also concerned about that, please let us know and we can provide that information to you as well.
Thanks, Mike. There was a general question about flushed versus raised medians.
I assume by squash median, they mean depressed median versus raised median. So typically, like in this case, we are using primarily raised median out there. That's usually, or that about the 6-inch curve out there. Squash median is something that is done primarily in the Chicagoland area. It's usually about 2-3 inch high median. It's very similar to the corrugated median that we talked about, limited locations on here. We do have 1 or 2 places in the district, like in Rockford on Kishwaukee Street, that has the lower median on it. Again, the only reason we're using it in the locations we are on this project is that the entrances are so tight we can't give individual turn lanes out there, and at the ends where we want to get people's attention with the corrugated median before they get to the raised median. The reason why we prefer using the raised median is simply the fact that it is a positive barrier that prevents people from crossing lanes and getting into the opposing lane. Again, a raised median and preventing people from doing a head-on is a far better situation than someone going headlong into each other. That is usually a recipe for, severe injuries, if not fatalities.
Great, thank you, Mike. This is just a comment, but I will read it out loud. I want to voice Boone County Board's opposition to the proposed median that is in the current plans. Thank you for that comment. This is another comment. I live off Business 20 for over 10 years, and I also work on the construction side of things. Beneficial information can only help. Thank you. And one other question here. Have you used eminent domain? How many property owners were condemned? John, if you want to take that one.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure, absolutely. It says, have you used eminent domain and how many property owners were condemned?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that question. In relation to this project, we haven't started acquiring any property, so condemnation has not been used. However, condemnation is a tool that we can use if necessary. There are times when we are not able to obtain clear title to property without the use of condemnation. And there are times when the two sides just cannot agree on what the compensation should be, and that's where the courts come in handy. But beyond that, as far as how often have we used it, it varies for every project.
Great, thank you. This other person asks, can you provide corrugated mountable medians to the west of Anderson Drive so it's easier to make a left turn off Anderson Drive?
I can answer that. We can look at that possibility. I guess the one thing I would say on that is if we have people, the way I'm picturing this is they're saying they want to use the corrugated median to get onto, say, westbound as they're leaving and then merging onto the through pavement. This could cause issues as well, from a standpoint that people don't know what exactly is going on as they're driving past you, and it could lead to sideswipe crashes and what have you. That's why we typically don't do something like that. There are certain situations if we have high speeds where we might do like a merge lane or something like that, or like an acceleration to merge, but I don't know if that would be warranted in this location given the 45-mile-an-hour speed. But we will certainly look at it.
Great, thank you. This person asks, has an environmental justice analysis been done?
Yep. This is Mike Keene again. From an environmental justice standpoint, we are currently working through that along with the other sign-offs and requirements as we progress through the project. We will have that included at the end of the report.
Thanks, Mike. Someone else asks, are the detention areas being built in anticipation of future development?
Yeah, Ellie, this is Bryce Beckstrom. I'm with Hanson, the consultant and drainage lead for the project here. So the detention areas being proposed and that Amber showed in the slides there earlier are just to address runoff from the additional lanes that are being added here for this project only. The design didn't take into account any future development capacity for those detention basins.
Great, thanks, Bryce. Someone else asked, can you please provide a cost breakdown on the center median? This is opposed by the Boone County Board. We feel this money could be used elsewhere. It is also opposed by several residences in the area. Several state representatives have also voiced concern over the need for this.
This is Mike. I can take that one. So whether we're doing a raised or a flush median out there, you're going to have pavement out there. If it's a flush median, you're talking a 12-inch solid pavement all the way across. If you're doing a raised median out there, it'll be curb and gutter, there'll be stone, and usually it's about a 4-inch top. So from just a cost standpoint, it's probably slightly cheaper for the median. The simple fact of the matter is, though, cost is not the main concern on this issue. It is a safety aspect and possibility to maintain access as this corridor develops. Again, you know, we have a section, or we have sections of US 20 East State Street in Rockford from Mulford to Lyford that has a raised median out there where there's no accesses in between the streets, you know, from Mulford to Perryville to Lyford. There aren't accesses directly onto Route 20. It is a couple right in, right outs, and then everything is at the signalized intersections. This really does work with capacity should this develop in this commercial area. Now, again, you know, we fully recognize this isn't commercial at this point, but we have to keep in mind this is getting built in 27. It's going to go through 27, 28. It needs to have a lifespan of at least 20 years, if not more. And we all know we usually take more than 20 years before we reconstruct anything. So we're talking about 2050 is our horizon line roughly. If we're looking at 2050, we need to make sure that this will accommodate not just the traffic now with the residents that are out there in the fields, but also any development coming from Rockford all the way to Belvedere and any kind of commercial development out there. By having the raised median out there, we have that opportunity to maintain access as this goes along. That was the point of the 1996 access control plan, was to make sure that as this grew and things came toward Belvedere, we had that opportunity to do it. Now, again, the flush median out there, it leaves it wide open for people to cross wherever, potential for head-ons, potential for anyone to do anything out there. By putting the raised median, we are defining that people can only turn at these given locations, where people want to turn at the current resident entrances or field entrances, but it doesn't give them free rein to just go wherever, to do something crazy like do a U-turn in the middle of the road, anything like that. So that is really the main reason for the raised median. It is to make sure that we have some sort of access control out there. We have defined locations where people can turn and where we can reduce crashes.
Great, thanks so much, Mike. Another question is the lower speed limit necessary for this project? I imagine most people would like to keep the current speed limit given the additional lanes.
I can answer that as well. Whether we're doing a raised median or a flush median out there, per IDOT policies, which are backed by the Federal Highway Administration, we should have posted speed limits of 45 miles an hour. So again, whether it was a flush median out there or whether it's the raised median that we're discussing here, it would need to be posted 45 miles an hour.
Excellent, thank you, Mike. This is a statement that I'll read. Regarding the Anderson Drive stoplight, it is important to note the traffic volume at the intersection peaks at morning and evening rush hours. Early morning and late afternoon traffic spikes are due to the daycare located there. Average traffic volumes are not representative of these peak hours. Thank you for your comment.
If I could add something to that,
Sure.
real quick here, just so people are aware, we do look at the counts throughout the day. Like the individual stated, you know, we're seeing out there that usually there are peaks before school and then late afternoon. I was even confirming that with a resident today, that there wasn't anything that they saw different than what we see in our counts. And yeah, you know, you're looking, you know, about 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., you know, maybe a little bit earlier for the school rush. And then in the afternoon when school's out and people are coming home from work between 4 and 6, that's when you're seeing your spike. And that's what we try and design the roads to handle. And that's one of the warrants that we look at when we're looking at the traffic signal, to see how much traffic there is at these peak hours to ensure that it can handle it. Now, again, we're keeping a close eye on this, especially at Anderson, because of the concerns people have. And so, you know, we want to keep an eye on that and make sure that if these warrants are hit, that we can then introduce a signal if it's warranted.
Thanks, Mike. That's really helpful to note. This is a statement and a question from Senator Stadelman's Chief of Staff. It says, Senator Stadelman is in Springfield for veto session and unable to attend. I believe I also attended the May public meeting on his behalf. At that time, if I recall correctly, the gaps in the raised median were already being discussed to address the concerns of residents about access. Our office has received many complaints about the raised median. Is there anything additional being considered to address these residents' opposition to the raised median?
This is Mike. Again, the big thing that we're looking at is the safety aspect on this, you know, and again, some sort of semblance of access control as this develops on it. The biggest concern we have is that, you know, we're building this brand new roadway. We're gonna put something out here that we're gonna have to tear out in a couple years, and in the meantime, it's gonna be unsafe. You know, the fact that we have a raised median proposed does help separate, again, the traffic eastbound and westbound. Adding these abbreviated turn lanes and access points gives people that little bit of refuge when they're trying to turn from the roadway into their properties, which function identically to a flush median. I guess, you know, with these questions with the flush median and these concerns that have been expressed with the county board, the one thing I would counter is what would be gained with a flush median that isn't already being provided with this raised median with these abbreviated turn lanes and accesses. Because from our standpoint, we are addressing the access issue and allowing accesses for people. We're also giving a wider openings for field entrances and what have you on it, where the only thing that we aren't providing with this is a flat surface for people to basically cross and open up to crashes as people may have an opposing crash. Forgive me, my mind went blank for a second there.
It's forgivable. You've been answering a lot of good questions. So thanks for that. One more sort of comment question. You want raised rubble sticks rather than preferred machines. Why? I think you probably covered that, but if you have any other comments, that's fine. Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, let's see. This one says, in every meeting you have mentioned a reduced speed limit, 45 miles per hour, and your analysis bases everything on the assumption that traffic will obey that speed limit. Anyone who has driven on Perryville Road north of Riverside, also 4 lanes at 45 miles per hour, knows that almost nobody will obey that speed limit. Even though it's posted 45 miles per hour, traffic moves at 55 or 60 miles per hour. Has your analysis considered the impact of such traffic speed despite your assistance on the lower speed limit? I think we already covered this as well, but if there's any other last minute comments, feel free. Otherwise, I'll move to the next comment. Anything else?
The only thing I would add is, again, having a raised median helps to define the opposing lanes. Again, a flush median or something along that line doesn't give that opportunity. So whether you're going 45, 55, or 60 miles an hour, you know, there's a positive barrier with a raised median versus if there's a higher speed and a flush median, there's more of a chance that they can cross and hit opposing traffic.
Great, thank you. And I think this is our last comment, unless there's something else, but it looks like right now this is our very last one. So it is a comment and I will read it. Roadside bike lanes become useless as they simply accumulate road debris that is unsafe and detrimental to bikes and tires. They tend not to be used. Thank you. And I don't receive, oh, there's one coming, I see. We'll hold off for that.
Well, I guess while we're waiting for this next comment, I do want to note we have quite a few people online right now. We also will have people listening to these recordings later on. You know, obviously we want to know what concerns people have. As you can see, there is concerns with that median. Our big concern is the safety and accessibility on here and maintaining some sort of corridor safety as we go through this area. But I would also encourage, you know, people who want to have these improvements to also voice their opinion on here, because it's always good to have that included into the report. So it, you know, it's not just the negativity on it, but we are aware that there are people that want this improvement.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, it looks like this is the last one. So this is coming from a county board member, a Boone County board member. Given that the neighbors and the Boone County board oppose a raised median, why not replace the raised median with a flush median? DeKalb and Sycamore corrected a similar traffic problem by simply replacing it with a turn lane. This has worked very well.
This is Mike again. So one thing to consider on this is if you look at, and again, we kind of talked about this in previous meetings, just west of here on, again, East State Street between Alpine and Fairview Roads. They have that right now. They have a 4-lane section with a flush median out there. We have gotten complaints for the last 20 to 30 years that it does not function well in that area. There are too many accesses directly accessing onto the road, which causes congestion, and it also increases the crashes. This is why you see east of Alpine Road that we went to this raised median as you go to the east. The people that when this first project report was done in 1985, they built it that way. They had this flush median out there, and they learned from their mistakes because, again, the congestion and the increased crashes. That's why in '96, we have the corridor protection, or not the corridor access control plan to help define that and limit those accesses and keep that raised median as this develops commercially. You can see from the Fairview to Alpine area over compared to Mulford to Perryville to Lyford, there's a lot of traffic going in both areas, but you move along a lot easier when you're in the east area that has that raised median. Again, you know, we would love to do something between Fairview and Alpine, and we've been approached by the city and different businesses multiple times to do something there. But the simple fact of the matter is it's already out there, and to close those accesses at this point is just not feasible. There's just too much impacts to those businesses, to the people along there, and it would just be too difficult to do at this time. That's why we are so ardently pushing on making sure that we have this raised median in this area, is to ensure that we have this available, you know, to have the safety out here, to have the access control in this area before it develops out. Again, you know, we consider, you know, adding these accesses, adding these abbreviated turn lanes to be a reasonable counter proposal to the flush median, because it will function just like the flush median. It just will have the definition of a a raised median out there as well. So the residents still have full access. They still have the safety aspect of being able to pull off. At the same time, we're still maintaining that raised median, having that positive barrier, having that additional safety out there, and the ability to have some sort of semblance of access control should this develop commercially.
Thank you. I think that concludes the question and answer section.
All right, so given no more comments, I'm going to close out this meeting. Again, I'm putting on the screen if you want to scan in order to get to the project website to make your comments via that location. Or don't forget, there's also going to be that October 30th between 1 to 4 option that is going to be, Ellie, do you have the address of that offhand?
Yes, it is. So the meeting will be, as Amber mentioned, it is on October 30th from 1 to 4, and it's at the River's Edge Recreation Center, and
Looks like it's at 1151 West Locust Street.
thank you.
And as a reminder, again, there's going to be no presentation there. That's just meant to have people write down their comments or vocalize their comments to a recorder. And there will be some project documentation available for review if anyone wants to take a look at that. So with that being said, I think we'll end our meeting. Thank you all for attending. We look forward to your comments.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you all for attending. And again, if there are questions, please feel free to continue to send them our way, and we will be available to answer questions on Monday as well.